real fault is mine for underestimating that warrior's power.
Recent Dragon Ball has made it a point to begin sending everyone down their own unique path. While the humans do so more out of necessity, Gohan has long been commonly considered the hero with the most potential power. However, has chosen to follow a path that lies almost directly opposite of his father Goku, valuing peace and family instead of strength and personal fulfillment. Most people seem to think that he just prefers other things, but in reality, Gohan actually hates fighting, and there's a reason why this, admittedly annoying trope of him continuing to get rusty from lack of training has been going on for so long. And this reason isn't something that often comes up in Dragon Ball, even though you would really expect it to. Take a guess at what it is, but I'm gonna hold on to the reveal until just a little bit later. For now, let's go back to the very beginning to figure out who Gohan really is and how that leads into the character and choices that we see today. As a boy, we get to see Gohan in probably his most pure form. Straight away, we're keyed into his love for animals, his love for nature, and just how important peace and stability are to him even at such a young age. This will be a core component of his character throughout the show, so keep this concept of valuing peace in mind as we go through the story. Next, we see Goku take Gohan to meet his old pal Roshi and some friends. And of course, this is where things all kick off. But before that, even when they land, we can already tell this is a bit of a stressful situation for Gohan. While some children are more social butterflies, Gohan is certainly a more introverted kid. He likes hanging out with his animal friends on Mount Paozu, but meeting other people seems to be a bit scary for him. And as soon as he starts to warm up to the situation,
What is it?
and we all know what happens next. But what's important here is to see it from Gohan's perspective. Gohan leaves the safety of his home to visit strangers on a strange island. As soon as he begins to make friends with them, another stranger shows up, bashes one of his new friends through a wall, brutally gutshots his dad, bringing him to his knees, and then kidnaps him and flies away. Obviously, this is a pretty shocking turn of events for a young boy to be part of, but as you know, it doesn't stop there for poor Gohan. He then is locked away and forced to watch as his father gets ruthlessly beat up by this stranger.
Daddy?
And then, next thing he knows, he's kidnapped again by another stranger, his dad is dead, and he's forced to train in a foreign place lest everyone he knows die soon too. So, a pretty dark start for a 4-year-old. And crucially, keep in mind before we move forward that this fight between Piccolo, Goku, and Raditz marks the first fighting Gohan is a witness to. His only experience with fighting so far is one in which he watches, or at least hears, his father being beaten within an inch of his life and then ending up dead.
Even now, his friends are probably searching for them so they can wish him back. In the meantime, you will stay here and undergo my training. You're going to learn how to fight.
Our next arc with Gohan is his training with Piccolo, where he has a rough time at first, of course, but what's really interesting about this phase is how, as he gets stronger, he once again makes friends with the surrounding wildlife. This marks the start of a trend in which Gohan learns to take normally frightening situations and turn them into games to entertain himself. The tiger, the T-Rex, and I'm sure you can guess another, but we'll touch on that later. For now, Gohan's training is over and it's time for the Saiyans' arrival. Our brief moment of levity is gone, as now we enter fight number 2, and probably the darkest phase of Gohan's life. A small bit of hope arrives as Yamcha easily handles the first Cyberman, and then... Gohan watches his new friends get slaughtered in front of him, one after another, even almost being killed himself, leading to the sacrifice of the person he spent most of the last year with, his new mentor and, as some know him, Gohan's interim dad, Piccolo. And all this by just one of the 2 Saiyan invaders. The tail end of this fight is not much different for Gohan, as he leaves and re-arrives back on the scene of Goku vs Vegeta to see his father once again barely holding on to life. Although they walk out of this one alive and victorious, it's bittersweet, having lost so many along the way. 2 fights down for Gohan, and both so far resulting in the death of family or friends. This is very different from Goku's first few fights, which due to the different tone of the series at the time, really were all fun and games. Not only nothing Goku had to take too seriously, but nothing that really posed much of a threat to him either way. And we're almost to the point where things come full circle and we get to talk about what I mentioned in the intro, but first we need to cover just one more arc, Namek. So far, I've only implied it, but it seems relatively clear that Gohan is pretty staunchly averse to fighting. During the Saiyan saga, he only steps in when either he gets very angry, or he feels like he absolutely needs to, like in the case of going back to help his dad lest he die again. Gohan is eager to fly to Namek and help find the new set of Dragon Balls to bring back his dead friends. This does not mean that he's eager to fight.
My friends are gone and they're not coming back. I've got to help find the Dragon Balls.
Despite saying that he wants to fight, what he obviously means is that he wants to put in the effort to save his friends, just like they did for him. Is Gohan itching at another fight with Vegeta like Goku would be? No, of course not. He just wants to bring back Piccolo, and the others, and set everything back to normal.
Piccolo died trying to help me, so I think I should do everything I can to help him.
His choices are either fight, or leave your friend and mentor dead forever, and risk the same for anyone else who dies due to the Earth's Dragon Balls being gone. It's really not much of a choice at all. Of course he feels compelled to the former. So off we go to planet Namek, to retrieve the Namekian Dragon Balls, where everything goes smoothly and as planned.
So let's go meet some locals and collect some Dragon Balls!
Okay.
Though Namek was supposed to be a quick snatch and grab, it actually turns into one of the most horrific situations in Gohan's childhood. We go from just make a quick wish on the Dragon Balls and come home, to trapped on a planet on the other side of the universe with an infamous space warlord and the man who almost killed me, my dad, and my bald friend. But it's here on Namek that we also witness some of Gohan's most defining character moments. As he and Krillin look over the Namekian village being attacked, a real and genuine rage builds up in him, until seeing the invaders go for the children finally makes him boil over and jump into action. But why would someone so averse to conflict involve themselves at this exact moment? You could say it's just because he's a good guy and the good guy is supposed to save the child when they're getting attacked, but if we look at this moment in conjunction with the previous arcs, we can see a much deeper picture. One of Gohan's utmost held values is innocence, something that was stolen from him not all that long ago. Going from a peaceful life with your family to having everyone you know dying around you at only 4 or 5 years old, I really can't think of a way a child would be more rapidly robbed of their innocence. It's for this reason that we see Gohan get most angry when this value is on the line. We saw it first during the Raditz arc with his own innocence, not just to protect his father.
Leave my dad alive!
But really to protect himself, to attempt to preserve what was left of the peace and innocence in his life. And now we see it here reflected back at him by Dende as the Namekians suffer the same brutal outcomes that he did just an arc ago. And of course, this isn't the last time either. We'll see it again when Android 16 is used as another catalyst for Gohan during the Cell Saga. All in all, these values of protecting the peaceful and innocent people around him will be a cornerstone of Gohan going forward because of these early childhood moments. And almost every time we see him fight, it will be because of these values propelling him. Now, we'll jump over most of the Namek arc and head straight to the end. Now Gohan is tasked with facing down a guy who, the guy that he was scared of, is scared of. Frieza represents what I would consider a major roadblock to Gohan's development. Not only does he kill another one of Gohan's close friends right in front of him,
Please, no!
someone that Goku directly calls innocent, to belabor my previous point about the importance of this trait.
How many innocent people? How many of my friends have to die before you stop?
Gohan also momentarily believes that his father is dead again too at the hands of Frieza and the explosion of planet Namek.
Goku, he tried to get away, but Namek exploded before he could.
Given the entirety of this experience of Namek, including the shocking twist of the difficulty of their mission, facing down an evil tyrant and his minions, and the perceived death of 2 more people close to him, we can understand pretty easily why Gohan may be totally averse to fighting going forward into what we called teen and adult Gohan during the arcs of Cell, Buu, and beyond. And this, after mostly wrapping up the Kid Gohan phase, is where I'll touch on the topic that I hinted at in the introduction to this video, and that is trauma. You may have guessed that's what it was, and it's a wonder we don't see more hints at it in the series after all the things our heroes have gone through. But what I want to talk about today is a bit more than just bad thing happened, feel bad thing. It's a system that shapes Gohan's entire life moving into teen and adulthood, and one that no one really seems to have thought about. The interpretation of trauma that I'll be talking about today is one that French psychoanalyst Jacques Lacan focuses on in seminars during the 1950s and 60s, which differ from the colloquial A trauma event causes B reaction interpretation. In the 1920s, Sigmund Freud lays the groundwork for a reversal of this causality in which B event gives rise to A trauma in a more retrospective fashion. This helps for us to explain why Gohan doesn't stop fighting altogether after the initial death of his father and friends. Instead, there's another event that triggers what most just attribute to a gentle nature, one that we'll get into during the Cell Saga in just a second. To help explain his version of this, Lacan distinguishes what he calls the real. Separate from the understandable or predictable reality of everyday life, traumatic events tear apart this reality, a shock that gives us a glimpse of the real with what Lacan calls holes. These holes we can understand as trauma, which are often difficult to face and easy to run from. For Gohan, this normal or everyday life is his life with his family on Mount Paozu. But it's not his kidnapping nor the death of his father that serves as the first breaking point of trauma for him. Possibly due in part to the fact that he didn't actually witness his father's first death, the real inciting incident, the A traumatic event, was the death of his mentor Piccolo, one in which he feels himself responsible. Back in the Saiyan Saga, Gohan freezes up and ruins the plan made by Piccolo and Krillin.
I can't.
Gohan!
Now go on!
Piccolo is forced to sacrifice himself to protect his student. This inflicts Gohan with a heavy guilt over his failure to act, and an oppressive sense of inadequacy. From here, Gohan is incredibly intent on doing whatever it takes to bring back Piccolo, such as taking the dangerous trip to Namek, which upon not going as planned, especially when faced with the death of his friend Krillin and the perceived deaths of Piccolo and Goku, only cements these feelings once again. Finally, everything comes to a head in the Cell Saga when Gohan is faced with his friends and family on the brink of death to the Cell Juniors. And finally, the death of Android 16, crucially another innocent and peace-loving character, at the hands of Cell himself. This is Gohan's glimpse at the real, the B event giving rise to A's trauma, the shattering of his perception that these conflicts can be resolved through negotiation and understanding, and the realization or reminder of his guilt and inadequacy. In a way, Android 16 is him, and he represents his father had Goku failed to act and act effectively in the same way he couldn't during previous events. This realization causes Gohan to snap, and is not only why he finally unleashes Super Saiyan 2, but also why he basically swears off any real fighting going forward. This is his trauma point, or the hole in his reality. Lacan builds on Freud's trauma groundwork with a newly interpreted explanation of a dream that Freud reports in his 1991 collection, The Interpretation of Dreams, in which a father experiences the loss of his son to fever. Exhausted, the father asks a friend to watch over his son's body while he gets some sleep in the next room. While asleep, the father is presented with a dream of his son speaking to him, asking, "Father, can't you see I'm burning?" This mental image awakens the father as he realizes a candle has tipped over and the room next door is on fire. In this example, the father is presented with a reality of the fire, his son's body burning, possibly by the smell of the smoke or the sound of the fire. To retreat from this dark reality, he creates a dream, but in this dream he's confronted by the real, his trauma, the "why hast thou forsaken me"-esque guilt of his son's words, and so he retreats again by awakening, to put out the fire and, in a small way, atone, to save his son the way he couldn't the first time, but importantly, to avoid the real, the guilt that he feels over his son's death. Lacan posits that it's this fleeing of the real that awoke the father, not the smell of the smoke or the sound of the fire. For us, the son's death is Piccolo's sacrifice during the Saiyan Saga. The retreat to dreams is Gohan's attempt to negotiate with Cell, and the son speaking those harrowing words, the representation of the father's guilt, is Gohan's guilt of his inaction. Finally, the father awakening to escape his guilt is parallel to Gohan's Super Saiyan 2 awakening, and defeating Cell is in line with putting out the fire. While yes, Gohan saves the day here, he still hasn't really confronted the feelings that burden him. In fact, he's still running from them. These feelings, specifically this guilt buried within him, is why Gohan truly hates fighting. Now, every time Gohan fights, the feelings of inadequacy rise up and face him. We all know about Gohan's immense potential. Everyone tells him that if he just trained, no one could stand up to him. But what they're missing is that when Gohan fights, it's not his opponents he's fighting, it's himself. It's his trauma. And this is why Gohan goes through the frustrating cycle that we see him go through in the Buu Saga and beyond. Win fight, get rusty, fight again, lose, train, win fight, and repeat again. This has been Gohan's cycle for many years at this point. But the question is, why? Sure, we can chalk it up to writers writing themselves into a corner and using Gohan as an asshole to get them out. But in-universe, if you were, say, a psychoanalyst on Earth in the Dragon Ball world, what would you point to as the purpose for this never-ending cycle? For me, of course, if you had such a traumatizing childhood of combat, where every time you fight, someone you cared about dies, you probably wouldn't want to stick with it either. So Gohan trains, fights, and wins, and in doing so is reminded of his childhood, of the Cell Saga where him pushing aside these emotions of guilt led to the death of his father, or of the Saiyan Saga where him attempting to step in against Nappa led to the death of his father. So he stops fighting, until he's forced to again by extenuating circumstances, like the evil space tyrant that killed your friend coming back to life and invading your planet.
Does that hurt, child? Are you suffering now?
Then he obviously loses the fight due to not training.
This is my fault.
And is confronted with these feelings of inadequacy, like those he felt during the Saiyan Saga when Piccolo was forced to sacrifice his life.
I've gotten too weak. I let this happen.
Which in turn makes him start training again so he can protect the people he loves. Rinse, repeat. And this vicious cycle of trauma and running from that trauma, whether it's via fighting or not fighting, continues into perpetuity. And though some say Gohan enjoys fighting for sport, just not in these life-risking situations, I disagree. These feelings leak into every fight Gohan has, and he hates having to engage with all of them. After the Cell Saga, we never really see Gohan express the eagerness to fight that we did before he left for planet Namek. He doesn't fight for fun. In fact, when presented with the opportunity multiple times to fight for fun, he declines. At the start of the Buu Saga, Gohan is taking his first big step toward focusing on school and a normal human life. And although he still fights as Saiyaman, on one hand I would point out that Gohan fighting regular humans is kind of like you or me against mosquitoes. But on the other, I think it's a bit more poignant. This very simplistic and easy fighting he does helps him to stave off the guilt he feels for his past inaction. So instead of fighting at the level of his father or Vegeta, he fights these normal humans. It makes him feel like he's doing something to help, keeping those darker emotions at bay, but comes with none of the risks or feelings of real fighting, in the way that you wouldn't feel the exhilaration of a fight when swatting a mosquito. This would be the equivalent of the father waking up from his dream to put out the fire in our earlier example. Though he's taking action and engaging in some way, it also serves as a way to run from the hole where his guilt resides. As I mentioned at the start of the video, think of this as Gohan again turning a frightening situation into a game for himself, like with the tiger and the dinosaur.
Look up there! It's that guy! Saiyaman!
But inevitably, he gives up his crime fighting as well. And next, when he enters the World Martial Arts Tournament, he does so not only via blackmail from Videl.
Okay, here's the deal. If you enter the World Martial Arts Tournament, I'll keep your secret. How's that?
But also extreme pressure from his mother and the chance to see his dead father again. This is not exactly what I would call enthusiastic consent. A trend we'll see going forward where every time Gohan fights is due to some sort of pressure or coercion, never by his own pure decision and desire for battle. Let's even take his fight with Dabura as another example. From this panel, you might assume that he's quite enthusiastic about the fight, but if we look back at the previous panels, it paints a pretty different picture. Two senior male figures, those who represent half of his heritage in his Saiyan side, discuss how weak he has gotten compared to the harrowing experience he has during the Cell games. He looks up to Goku and Vegeta. He respects them a ton. So to have them debating this in front of him puts a lot of pressure on him to prove himself.
Pattern's getting way too obvious. He's telegraphing all his moves.
Ah, pathetic. Just look at it.
They're playing off of the guilt of his inadequacy right in front of him. So of course he'll step up to fight and try to prove them, and crucially, yes, himself, wrong. Yet another example of Gohan agreeing to fight based off of coercion and not enthusiasm, like we see with many others in the series. To compare him to someone similar that I think does enjoy fighting for sport or fun, but not in life or death situations, Krillin shows far more hallmarks of someone who enjoys fighting, but prefers to focus on family than Gohan. Both Krillin and Gohan are family-focused people who do a bit of crime fighting on the side, but Krillin multiple times reminisces about his days being neck and neck with Goku, and more than once Krillin even asks Goku to give him a real fight so that he can feel that rush again, and compare their strength. We really just don't see Gohan running around doing stuff like this.
Goku, would you mind slugging me just once? What?
This shows me that Krillin is someone who likes fighting but prefers other things, but Gohan seems to dislike fighting more strongly in a general sense. To touch on it briefly, looking at Gohan's fight with Super Buu, it does seem like he's enjoying the fight, but I think it's pretty obvious to anyone who's watching or reading that he's not enjoying the fight for fighting's sake, like Goku might, but instead is enjoying the more retributive aspect of stomping Buu, who had just killed, well, everyone, and just like in the Cell Saga, it comes back to bite him.
Fight you? No, I'm planning to kill you.
To close out Gohan's arc through Dragon Ball as a whole, during Super, there are a few times where he fights, and of course they're generally at risk of either the Earth or the universe being destroyed. He only fights in the anime-only Zeno Expo, because beforehand, Goku tells him about the rules of the Tournament of Power, and the show makes it very clear that he's only doing it to protect his family.
Alright, Dad. I'll join the fight. Gotta protect my family, don't I?
Obviously, I don't need to explain why he's forced to join the Tournament of Power itself. And then, of course, in Superhero, he refuses to help with anything until Piccolo makes him think his daughter is on the line. We know how much Gohan values protecting his family, and of course he wants to preserve the innocence in his daughter that was stolen from him when he was her age. There are other fights Gohan either joins or turns down throughout the show, but you won't find anywhere he's enthusiastic to engage. Certainly not like Goku, and really, not even like Yamcha. Even Yamcha, who is also signed out of the Z-Team, was hoping they'd ask him to join the Tournament of Power.
So, what's this Tournament of Power? Ah, jeez!
What Gohan really wants is just to be left alone and at peace with his family, with those he loves and cares about safe. At the end of the day, we see a character whose traumatic childhood really shapes who he is as a person today, forced back into the same harrowing loop again and again and again. So the question we're left with is, will it ever end? Will Gohan ever be able to overcome these feelings and either stick with fighting or entirely swear it off and allow the next or previous generations to take over? Really, it's hard to say. Perhaps he'll never truly confront these feelings, or maybe this recent event with Cell Max where he saw what he thought was Piccolo sacrifice his life once again was what he needed to see to confront his guilt. Maybe we'll witness Gohan in the coming arcs make the change to continual training in order to protect his family and friends. Maybe he'll say it was just too much to witness again, and he'll be done with fighting for good. Or maybe this is just another step in the never-ending cycle of the trauma of Gohan.